Hi guys, welcome to my channel Memorable Life. Over the years, technology has revolutionized our world and daily lives. Technology has made our lives easy. Technology has improved communication, transportation, education and learning process, healthcare and many other infrastructure business areas. While technology can be very beneficial, it can control our lives without us even knowing it. Technology has the power to do many things, and changing the world is one of them. Today I am going to talk about one of the American business magnate, industrial designer, investor, and media proprietor, Steve Jobs. He was the chairman, chief executive officer, CEO, and co-founder of Apple Incorporated, and the chairman of Pixar. Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California. His parents are Abdul Fattah Jandali and Joanne Schiebel and were adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs. Paul Jobs was a Coast Guard mechanic. Jobs, meanwhile, praised Paul's skills. Jobs was deeply involved in electronics when he was 10 years old. Though the Jobs family was not well off, they used all their savings in 1967 to buy a new home, allowing Jobs to change schools. The new house was in Cupertino, California. The house was declared a historic site in 2013, as it was the first site for Apple Computer. In 1968, Jobs began his first year in Homestead High School along with Bill Fernandez. Jobs read Moby Dick or The Whale is an 1851 novel by American writer Herman Melville. King Lear is a tragedy written by William Shakespeare. During his last 2 years at Homestead High, Jobs developed two different interests, electronics and literature. After graduating from high school in 1972, Jobs attended Reed College in Portland, Oregon, for 2 years. After first semester, Jobs dropped out of Reed College because he did not want to spend his parents' money on an education. Jobs learned a course on calligraphy that was taught by Robert Palladino. Jobs stated in one of the speech at Stanford University, he slept on the floor in friends' dorm rooms, returned Coke bottles for food money, and got weekly free meals at the local Hare Krishna temple. Here is the glimpse of Steve Jobs' speech at Stanford University.
It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it.
In that same speech, Jobs said, "If I had never dropped in on that single calligraphy course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces." In February 1974, Jobs began to look for a job. He was hired by Atari, Inc. as technishon. Jobs was working at Atari and saving money for his trip to India. As Jobs traveled to India to visit Neem Karoli Baba at his Kainchi ashram, in search of spiritual enlightenment. In mid-1975, Jobs was assigned to create a circuit board for the arcade video game Breakout. Jobs and Wozniak attended meetings of the Homebrew Computer Club in 1975, which was a stepping stone to the development and marketing of the first Apple computer. Jobs and Wozniak both decided on the name Apple after Jobs returned from his time spent in the farm's apple orchard. Jobs planned to produce bare printed circuit boards off Apple I and sell them for $50 each. To raise the money they needed to build the first batch of the circuit boards. So Wozniak sold his HP Scientific calculator and Jobs sold his Volkswagen van. Scott McNealy, one of the co-founders of Sun Microsystems, said that Jobs broke a glass age ceiling in Silicon Valley because he'd created a very successful company at a young age. In April 1977, Jobs and Wozniak introduced the Apple II at the West Coast Computer Fair. It is the first consumer product to have been sold by Apple Computer. The Apple II became one of the first highly successful, largely produced microcomputer products in the world. Jobs was worth over $1 million in 1978, when he was just 23 years old. He was also one of the youngest people ever to make the Forbes list of the nation's richest people. Sales of Apple II skyrocket after revolutionary spreadsheet software VisiCalc is introduced. In December 1979, Steve Jobs is shown the first working graphical user interface at Xerox PARC.
Is a pointing device that moves a cursor around the display screen.
Adele and her colleagues showed the Apple programmers an Alto machine running a graphical user interface.
A selected window displays above other windows, much like placing a piece of paper on top of a stack on a desk.
The visitors from Apple saw a computer that was designed to be easy to use, a machine that anybody could operate and find friendly, even the French.
Choose one.
I think mostly what we got in that hour and a half was inspiration.
In May 1980, Apple launches the Apple III, which proves a disastrous flop. In the 25th of February 1981, 50 Apple employees laid off by CEO Mike Scott without notice. Mike Markula becomes interim CEO. In the 12th of August 1981, IBM launches the IBM PC, the biggest threat to Apple's future yet. Jobs began directing the development of the Macintosh in 1981. In 1983, Jobs offered John Sculley away from Pepsi-Cola to serve as Apple's CEO, asking, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?" By early 1985, the Macintoshes was a failure. Sculley decided to restructure Apple and suggested an idea to the board that would take out Steve Jobs from the Macintosh group and put him in charge of new product development. This move would effectively cause Steve Jobs powerless within Apple. On September 17, 1985, Jobs submitted a letter of resignation to the Apple board. 5 additional senior Apple employees also resigned and joined Jobs in his new venture, Next. The Macintosh's struggle continued after Jobs left Apple. Microsoft was developing its graphical user interface, 4DOS, which it was calling Windows, and didn't want Apple to sue over the similarities between the Windows GUI and the Mac interface. Sculley granted Microsoft the license, which later led to problems for Apple. Though the Macintosh was more expensive, so, through the late 1980s, the Windows user interface was getting better and better and was thus taking increasingly more share from Apple. It seemed clear as the 1980s blown down that Apple couldn't go it alone indefinitely against the whole IBM clone market. Eventually, Jobs attracted the attention of billionaire Ross Perot, who invested heavily in the company. The Next computer was shown to the world in what was considered Jobs' comeback event, a lavish invitation-only gala launch event that was described as a multimedia extravaganza. The celebration was held at the Louise M. Davies Symphony Hall, San Francisco, California on Wednesday, October 12, 1988. Next and IBM form a partnership to have Next software run on IBM machines. In 1988, Pixar launches its new computer graphics workstation. At SIGGRAPH, Pixar releases its new short tin toy. It will end up winning 1988's Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. In April 1989, Steve Jobs is named Entrepreneur of the Decade by Inc. magazine. In May 1991, Pixar signs a deal with Disney to make a computer-animated feature film. In November 1993, Disney's Jeffrey Katzenberg puts a halt to the development of Toy Story because of creative disagreements. In November 1994, Pixar resumes work on Toy Story. In February 1995, Steve starts focusing less on Next and more on Pixar before Toy Story is released. He becomes president and CEO of Pixar Animation Studios. Steve Jobs' worth rises to $1.5 billion, more than it ever was during his first tenure at Apple. In December 1996, Steve Jobs is named informal advisor to Apple CEO Gil Amelio. Gil Amelio was moved out by the Apple board of directors after a disastrous quarter. Steve Jobs is named interim CEO and installs his next executive team at the top of Apple. Steve Jobs introduces Apple's new board of directors and a piece with Microsoft at Macworld Boston. In 1997, Apple starts its Think Different campaign to restore its damaged brand image. In the 6th of May 1998, Steve Jobs introduces Apple's revolutionary iMac at the Flint Center Auditorium in Cupertino, 14 years after he had introduced the Macintosh at that same place. In the 5th of January 2000, Steve Jobs becomes Apple CEO at Macworld San Francisco. In the 19th of May 2001, Apple opens its first retail stores in Tysons Corner, Virginia and Glendale, California. Steve Jobs introduces the first Windows-compatible iPods at Macworld NY. Steve Jobs unveils the Power Mac G5, the world's fastest computer, at WWDC 03. In 2003, the day hell froze over, Steve Jobs introduces iTunes for Windows and further demonstrates Apple's growing lead over its competitors in the digital music business. Steve Jobs is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, but stubbornly refuses any modern medical treatment for months. He tries alternative diets instead. In August 2004, Steve Jobs finally has his pancreatic tumor removed by surgery. In the 6th of June 2005, Steve Jobs announces that Apple is going to switch away from Motorola's and IBM's PowerPC architectures and use Intel processors in its future Macs instead. This move will further help the growing adoption of the Mac. In 2005, Steve Jobs makes a memorable commencement speech at Stanford University. History will remember its closing remarks, Steve's advice to the young students, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," a quote from the last page of the Whole Earth catalog from his youth. Steve introduces the Motorola ROCKR, an iTunes-compatible cell phone. Steve Jobs unveils the first two Intel Macs at Macworld, the iMac and the new MacBook Pro. In 2006, Disney buys Pixar. In the 9th of January 2007, Steve Jobs introduces iPhone and its revolutionary touchscreen interface. He also introduces Apple TV and announces the company's name change from Apple Computer Incorporated to Apple Inc. iPhone is released in the US the same day as Pixar's 8th feature film, Ratatouille. At Macworld 2008, Steve Jobs introduces MacBook Air with the tagline, "The world's thinnest notebook." Apple announces it will open the iPhone platform to outside developers with the App Store. In 2009, Steve Jobs announces he will not speak at Macworld 2009 because of his health, and takes a 6-month medical leave of absence. Steve receives a liver transplant at the Methodist University Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. Back at Apple, Steve Jobs makes the first public appearance after his transplant to introduce new iPods at the It's Only Rock and Roll event. In 2011, Jobs surprises the world by announcing his new medical leave of absence, without any end date. The last keynote Worldwide Developers Conference 11, Steve Jobs appears at the Cupertino City Council to unveil Apple's plans for its new Spaceship campus. This would prove to be his last public appearance. In the 24th of August 2011, Steve Jobs resigns as CEO of Apple, with the words, "I have always said if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know." Unfortunately, that day has come. Tim Cook becomes Apple's CEO. On the 5th of October 2011, Steve Jobs dies at home, surrounded by his family.